Welcome to What She's Worth, the podcast dedicated to empowering women, amplifying bold voices, and challenging the status quo. This show offers candid conversations about leadership, career growth, and workplace equity. Featuring inspiring guests from industry leaders to rising changemakers, we celebrate ambition, advocate for equality, and provide actionable tools to help women thrive. Join us as we dismantle barriers, build confidence, and own our worth. Because knowing your worth is just the beginning. Owning it changes everything. All right, everybody, welcome back to the What She's Worth podcast. I'm Ashleigh Droz, your host and professional career counselor, and today I am joined by powerhouse leader and strategic innovator, Kristen Vanselow. As the AVP, Assistant Vice President for Innovative Education and Partnerships at Florida Gulf Coast University, Kristen brings deep insight into what it means to lead with courage, vision, and resilience. We are diving into everything from long game leadership to navigating respect versus reward. Kristen, welcome to What She's Worth.
Thank you, Ashleigh. I'm very, very blessed to be here. And I have to tell you that I immediately think we should be switching roles because you are someone who should be featured on your own podcast.
Oh, well, they hear me all the time, but maybe that's a good idea. Maybe someday I will do that. We'll flip the script. Yeah. Well, so I have been waiting for you to be in this chair. Just so everyone has a little bit of a background, Kristen was my first friend when I moved here to Florida 10 years ago. I knew not a soul, and here she was. And not only that, but she has turned into someone that I admire, someone that I look up to, someone that I consult with on a regular basis, someone who has to put up with my rants and my vents. I don't know. You, Kristen, I just adore you. And I adore you personally, but I also just admire you so much professionally. So I'm very excited to get into this conversation today.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But before we get started, we do have to acknowledge that there are two others in the room with us today. I know we're here in the chairs, but who do we have? Who do we have here?
So we've got two beautiful young ladies.
We
have
do.
Lainey and Wrigley are joining us, and they are truly, I would say, for both of us, a balance. They help us achieve that balance.
Yeah.
Unconditional love.
That's so true. Well, you can't see them on camera yet. And for those of you that are just listening, they're dogs. They're dogs, but they're more than dogs.
They're young ladies.
They're young ladies. They're more than dogs. They're both staring at Kristen right now. Lainey is mine, and she will probably be the one that is the most disruptive during this conversation, but that's okay. We love her still. But we could not do this podcast without Wrigley.
No, we could not. And, I'll just, for anyone who sees your podcast.
Yeah.
This is Wrigley.
That's Wrigley.
And she should probably have her own podcast.
Yeah. It'll be quiet, but it would be amazing. We should make her a YouTube channel.
We should make her a YouTube
Yeah.
channel.
If you, the camera's right here if you want to hold her up really quick and make sure everybody can see how cute she is. We love Wrigley. So
she's a good girl.
yeah. So if you hear them, it's going to come up later talking about support systems and things that keep us going when things get hard. And so we couldn't do it. Oh, here's Lainey. Sorry, guys. She's already coming in like a wrecking ball. So, all right. Well, are you ready? Are you ready to get started?
I hope I'm ready.
You are ready. I know you are. All right. So I want to, there she is. Feel free to kick her off. Lainey.
Go play with Wrigley.
Okay. Down you go. All right.
All right.
So let's start at the beginning. What inspired your journey into higher education and specifically leadership? I want to know about. And how did you find your voice along the way? Because you have a strong voice, and that is one of the reasons I admire you so much. So how did you find it?
Well, it's, like any college student, when we're in college, and I went as a traditional student. I'm a fourth generation college student. And, today we still serve so many first generation students. So I feel very, very fortunate that I come from a family that has always really valued education, but I didn't know precisely what I wanted to do. The statistics that were back then, and I won't date myself right now, but the statistics that were back then remain today, that students are going to change their major 5 times before they ever graduate. And, there's this complex development that you go through. Our brains are not fully developed when we go to college. I was really searching for what I wanted to do next as I approached graduation. And I had chosen a major that was focused on family and community engagement. And I thought for one moment I wanted to be a packaging major. I thought for another moment that I was going to be an education major, but I didn't really want to be in a traditional K through 12 classroom. Then I really wanted to be like a high school counselor that was going to help with that career in college impact for a student and helping them navigate that as they graduate from high school. But then I realized you have to be an educator first in order to do that. So I thought, no, maybe not. So I recognized as a senior, while I was involved in service learning at my university, Michigan State, go Spartans, that I could not have valued that experience anymore because it really showed me the path I wanted to be on. And that was working in a college or university environment and helping students navigate it at that level, not necessarily at that high school level that I thought was my passion and my goal. And so I immediately applied for a graduate degree program that would allow me to specialize in higher education leadership and student affairs administration. And I was able to actually stay at my alma mater. And it was probably the one thing that launched every bit of passion I have today, because I landed a graduate assistantship. And for anyone that's gone through that journey, that can be a grueling but really amazing experience. And most people in our field tend to get graduate assistantships that have to do with housing and residence life, because they do need people to do the grunt work and be there supervising the students and doing a good job. But I knew in no way, shape, or form did I really want that to be my reality. A lot of my other then soon-to-be colleagues ended up with graduate assistantships in things like financial aid and student activities and other areas. But I thought that's not really what I wanted to do with that career. I wanted it to be more academically oriented. And so I ended up getting an opportunity to work in transfer admissions for Michigan State. And so it was a really rewarding experience because I learned so much about the relationships between the different systems of higher education, the different opportunities for students, the importance of pathways, the importance of access, because to me, that's what I'm most passionate about, is that we provide access for individuals to pursue education if that's their goal. So that's a long way to get to my answer, but really, if I had not had the experiences I did as an undergraduate student, I wouldn't have chosen this as my career. And what is really kind of amazing to consider is that, and I will date myself, I just turned 50 this year, so it's like I'm crushing it, I think.
Yes,
but
you
at the same
are
time,
crushing it.
At the same time, now that I have a child that's navigating the higher ed waters, I've never left a college campus since going to college after high school, and so while I do know that I'm older, because I am 50 now, I've never been off of a college campus like my entire adult life. And so it's easy to stay passionate because I do care so very much about the access and the different populations that we get to serve and the lives we get to change. And for the very first time in the last few years, I've actually been able to observe the impact that I've made right here in Southwest Florida. And so it reminds me every day why I keep doing it. When you asked me about emerging as a leader in higher ed, what's really funny is that about 10 years into my professional journey, I found a box of old report cards and things from my childhood. And I had a report card from my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. McGovern, that identified me as having extremely strong leadership skills and that she saw that I was going to go very far in life. And I thought that is hilarious.
At 5 years old?
At 5 years old.
Okay, well,
and so
Mrs. McGovern, shout out.
Absolutely. And I have to say that Mrs. McGovern, she saw something in me that I didn't see until probably more recently. I'm blessed to be called a leader and have the opportunity to lead, whether formally or informally. And as many times as I've tried to stifle that in myself, I have never been able to. And for that reason, my strong voice that you admire is not always admired by everyone. Sometimes that strong voice is seen as, I don't know what. I don't know if it's sometimes too much confidence or lack of patience, because the conversations can continue for years and years and years without action. But that voice is an important one to share. And one piece of advice I would have for anyone that aspires to be and truly is a leader, whether formally or informally, is you use your voice. You have to use your voice.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, so many things in there, the passion that you have, the voice that you have. I'm going to jump a little bit forward here because you've already touched on something that I've been dying to talk to you about, and that is your leadership style. And it's one of the things that I know I've said this a million times already, how much I admire you, but it's one of the things that draws me to you as a leader is that you aren't afraid to say the hard things. You aren't afraid to disrupt the status quo. You aren't afraid to improve things from the inside. In fact, I from the outside looking in, I feel like that is something that drives you of I am here to make this place better. I am here to keep my values and the values of the university at the center of everything that you do. So it's interesting because you have the title, right? Assistant Vice President, you have the title right now, but leadership isn't always about the title. Can you share about a time when you like led disruptively or kind of acted as that intrapreneur within an organization? Because I want everyone to hear this.
Absolutely. So I never realized when I chose this career that every day would feel like a disruption, that every day would represent change in some way. And so over the years of my career, it completely was natural for me to go into positions where I was actually focused on continuous improvement all the time, because I recognized that you have to look at the system. So systems thinking is something that, has become more and more of, a new term, design thinking, systems thinking, but it's something that I've done ever since I started on this journey. And if you don't pay attention to the system and how everything relates, you can disrupt that system in an unintentional way to the negative, right? And so you're not looking, if you're only focused on your role and your responsibilities, and you're not looking beyond that, then you're not going to be able, to really make those positive impacts, because that's what change should lead to, right? It shouldn't be disruptive for the point of disrupting or going in a direction that you think is most valuable and important. So continuous improvement is something that's always led the way that I do this work and the way that I do disrupt at the times I disrupt. What I would also say about that is change management and making sure that it's not just to benefit you as an individual, but it's who are you here for? And in our field, in higher education, it's completely natural for me to place the student at the middle of everything that we do. And it gets very frustrating when folks don't do that. And so I try to always bring it back to, who are we doing this for? We shouldn't be making these decisions to make it easier on us. We shouldn't be making these decisions because it's just more logical to do it in a certain way, or we don't think we have the resources to do it. I don't believe in building the ship before you start rowing. I don't believe in having a perfect process outlined and put on paper before you actually start seeing if the steps you're intending to use are going to work. So I really lead with, we need to try things. And if we're failing, we pivot. If we're not failing, then we succeed and we continue to improve it. We don't just say, we did it, we're moving on to something else.
Right.
And I think that not a lot of people operate that way. At least I'm not feeling as though I'm finding as many people in my circles and within my role. It's interesting that you say that I have the title, and so that should allow me to emerge as the leader and have the autonomy and have the authority, but it doesn't work that way. There are a lot of folks that, regardless of title, it doesn't matter. If they're not involved in making the decision, they're not always committed to making the change. And so I lack the patience a lot to try to get everyone along with me. And it's something I work on every single day. And it's something that every supervisor I've had over the last 28 years has talked to me about. So it's never an unexpected part of my annual review to have someone say, okay, you always know, I try really hard not to know the answer to what I think the solution is. I don't want to do that. I really want to start with the end in mind, but then consider all solutions. But ironically, many times it comes back to something that I think we should have tried from the beginning. And so I feel like we have more urgency today than we've ever had before to make impact and make change, because higher ed is disrupted. If we're going to continue to meet the needs of the learners that we're welcoming today, we have got to move quickly.
Right.
We've got to be willing to take risks. We've got to be willing to say, I know we've done it this way, but we've got to do it differently. And we have to get out of each other's way and row in the same direction. And so I struggle with it every day at trying to bring people along with me, but I care very much that everyone gets to be part of those solutions and emerge as a leader within their own role. I think everybody's a leader. I don't think it matters what title you have. I think everybody's a leader, and whether you choose to lead on a broader scale across a system, or whether you choose to lead in your own individual responsibilities or role, I think everybody has that capability. It's just what's your comfort level and what do you want? The members of my team, I always try to get the 360-degree feedback going. You know, I always want to know from them, how can I be a better leader? And so I try to ask those questions more often than not, and I don't wait for those formal opportunities to do it. And my hope always is that anyone on my team would say that I respect anything that they bring forward as an idea, as an initiative, as a way to approach a problem that we might see, or a potential innovation. I want everyone to feel like their voice will be heard, and I get out of the way. And I hope that they see it that way, because I try really hard to get out of their way.
Yeah. Well, so you mentioned a few times urgency, patience, and trying to get everyone on board. But I also know that you play the long game when it comes to your career. So how do you balance that? The long game versus the urgency? Like, what does this mean to you in practice, and how has that mindset that gotten you through some of the more challenging seasons? Because there have been challenging seasons. So how do you do that?
This is one thing I'll comment on, because I didn't touch upon it in your last question. And that was, when have I been an entrepreneur, or when have I had to lead disruption or change when I didn't necessarily have the title? So it started back in the year 2000, because at that very moment, within the state of Florida in particular, our community colleges were transitioning to start offering bachelor's degrees. And Florida was the first state to pave the way in this way. And because I had had experience at Michigan State at a large regional comprehensive institution, Research One institution, and then I had gone to the University of Tampa, which was a small private liberal arts institution at the time, and had intentionally, while I was in graduate school, connected with community colleges. And, you know, I commented earlier on how important access is and knowing those different pathways for students. I think I was a valuable person to bring onto the team at St. Petersburg College, the first community college to become a state college, and go down that road of developing bachelor's degrees. And my goodness, was that disruptive to the world of higher ed. It was kind of like back when online learning emerged for the very first time, because there was always this hierarchy within higher education until that moment. So I had to be a disruptor, but I didn't have a high level of role. You know, I came in and I was an academic advisor. You know, I was tasked with really finding a way to make the +2 work, because, you know, we tend to use the 2+2 or the 4-year degree, even though I firmly believe students should take the time they need to get a degree and pursue that pathway and come and go as they want to. But we still do sometimes refer to it as 2-year degree, 4-year degree. And we had to bridge the gap between the institution was so perfect at preparing that student for what was next, but we were going to be there next. We were going to be where they were coming to finish that degree. And so creating that whole +2 had to happen. And to be tapped as a 25-year-old professional, 26-year-old professional, as someone who could do that was pretty empowering, but I was not in a true leadership role. And that's when I think I first realized, okay, you can be a leader even when you're not in the dean role or the AVP role.
You probably could have led this initiative when you were 5 years old, Mrs. McGovern.
I know, you're right. I absolutely could have.
You were 5 + 20 when you got this opportunity.
That's right. There you go. So I really do. I mean, I think because I was facing some adversity from day one, but also enthusiasm. The institution had the right culture for it. They had the right leadership for it. They brought the right leaders in to drive this change, and it made it work. So number one, you have to have leadership that you can, number one, respect. Number two, follow their lead, follow their vision. And in that moment, I could do that. And so I was seen as someone who was valued. You know, there were 65 plus advisors at the time there, but they turned to me as a leader. And I was brand new to their institution. I have never had that experience again since being at St. Petersburg College. So I look forward to chatting a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So, but bring me back to the question you just asked me.
That's okay. I actually have another one now.
Okay.
So as I'm listening to you, my brain is constantly putting the puzzle pieces together. And we work together in a very traditional field, like a field that values, being around for a long time and the customs. And I mean, even you look at the ceremonies that we have, and it's just higher education has been about tradition, but that is changing. And in higher education, you have worked specifically in innovation and spaces that like the change is constant. And so even in a very traditional industry field, you just kind of are the one moving the needle forward. So how do you stay grounded in your values while also being open to that disruption and everything that comes with it? Because the stuff that comes with being the disruptor while you're moving that needle forward is not always the most enjoyable results, or whatever the word I'm looking for is here, but it's not always the most enjoyable experience for you as the person leading the change.
Sure. It's a great segue from talking about the amazing experience professionally I had at St. Petersburg College. If I run into someone from that institution today, I do sometimes at conferences or statewide meetings, or just even when I'm back visiting that region of Florida, I am greeted with kindness, just what's the word I'm looking for? It's professionalism. It's sadness that I left the institution. But the last two institutions I've worked at, and that even the one I'm currently still at, I don't know that would be my reception when I come back. And so that's been a really interesting thing to try to unpack over the last 19 years that I have actually been in Southwest Florida. And I can gauge that number very easily because my son is 19. And when he was an infant and I was actually on maternity leave, the opportunity to follow a partner and relocate emerged. And at that time, I wasn't ready to leave the institution I was at. I wanted to stay there. I loved working there, but sometimes you don't get to be the one that leads that change in your life. And so for the last 19 years, I've really pondered what is so different about this place and, this location and the culture of these institutions that has made it that much more challenging to lead the change. And maybe it's because the positions I've held have been at higher levels. Maybe it's because there's been more adversity even because of that tradition and wanting to keep that tradition. And Southwest Florida is one of the areas of our country that is experiencing the most growth still today. The statistics change, but our friends at the Florida Chamber Foundation have consistently said for the last 2.5 years that between 800 and 1,000 individuals are moving to Florida every single day. And at least 20% of them have been coming our direction. And so we see it every day when we're driving around and enjoying this community. So I say that because I had a really important choice to make at my last institution before coming to FGCU. And that was, do I follow my integrity? Do I maintain my personal and professional integrity? Or do I follow the internal leaders that were looking to make tremendous change and really push back against a leader, a president, who was taking the institution in a direction that they no longer were willing to go? And do you stand true to the mission of the institution, or do you stand true to the relationships and the collegial environment that you're within? And I decided very early on that I will never compromise integrity of the institution that I work for. I will never compromise my personal integrity, and I will never follow someone because of the popular vote. And that led at that point, about a year later, to my position being eliminated. And so I never thought in my mid-30s that I would be without a job when I was at like the point of my career, I was a dean. I was a dean in her 30 somethings that had not yet achieved that doctorate degree. I was achieving something that I never thought would be possible in my entire career without having certain credentials and experiences. But there I was, and I was on an upward trend, not thinking for one moment that I wouldn't continue my valuable career at that institution, but I was let go. And I had to go through, some pretty hardcore grieving at that moment, because when we look at our worth and what we're worth, many times we are professionally aligning that. When you work hard and you've gone, the generation before us of women might not have had the same commitment to their professional lives. They might not have had to. They might not have wanted to. I'd like to think that if it was something that someone wanted, they would have been pursuing it. I'd love to share with you all that when my grandmother finally retired from working, and she did that, part-time for most of her life, but she was in her 90s, and she was the oldest Kelly girl in the greater Detroit area of Michigan, and was honored in a parade. I had a grandmother that, she was going to have her own presence, her own purpose. And so when we align so much of our purpose with our professional role, to suddenly lose that in your life is really, really humbling. And to also then realize that it happened in the first 7 years of your child's life. So you devoted the first 7 years of your child's upbringing to being the strongest professional you could possibly be, only to have that gone was very humbling, but also so appreciated, and helped me reground and reestablish, what do I care the most about? How am I going to find my purpose? How am I going to continue to choose joy? How am I never going to find the imbalance in my life again? How am I going to make sure that I don't let this happen to others? And do I still want to be in this career? And to figure that out really quickly.
Yeah.
And so building relationships is not something that I've ever taken lightly, nor do I build them for the sake of having a relationship. I am very much an introvert, and so I do not put myself out there very easily in social circles. When I go to big events or big conferences, it is hard and exhausting for me. So when I build a relationship, it is a true one. It is intentional. It is because I do see value in how we all work in this system together. And I also see my role in now this community that I've lived in for going on 20 years, that I want to have a lasting impact. And so the relationships I had built both internally and externally at that institution still helped me find the value and helped me very easily transition to this wonderful institution that I now have worked at for almost 12 years. So you face adversity, but you got to face it head on, and trust that you will realign with the people that share your mission, your vision, your values, your passion, and appreciate your integrity and following and making the right decisions along the way.
I love that you brought up integrity. That is a word that sticks with me. I talk about it all the time when it comes to professionalism. I actually just wrote a section on it in the chapter of the book I'm writing, in the professionalism chapter, because it's not just about looking the part and, showing up on time. Like, integrity is the bedrock of professionalism. So I'm very happy that you brought that up. And it sounds like you've been through some really tough stuff to stick with your own integrity. And there is often this tension between respect and reward. And I think we would all like to think that those two things go together, but they don't always, especially when it comes to a situation where you want to maintain your respect for yourself.
Right.
And you want to maintain the respect of the people who look up to you, the people who are important in your life. And that doesn't always align with the quote unquote reward that society tends to think of. So how do you define the difference between those two, and which one matters? I think I know which one matters most to you, but.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned in the last question something about the long game. And prior to my departure from my former institution, a vice president who I respected very much compared me to a colleague who had joined right around the same time as I did, but had a much faster trajectory to a position of leadership. And she said, you know what? She said, you are a long distance runner. but she's a sprinter, and sprinters run out of energy. They lose their breath and they can't keep up at that pace. And I think about that all the time, because patience is not just about, oh, be patient until something presents itself. It's not just about, I deserve it. I want to be there. I deserve to have the recognition. I deserve to have the reward. The right things genuinely do happen when you just take the time to trust. And if you can't trust in your leadership or your organization, then you probably don't belong in that place. If you can't have that trust, because the reward comes, the recognition is the most important thing. When I found myself at that, which path do you take? The path less traveled. I wish that I had left that institution on my own, because I knew that I no longer fit there. And so I learned that lesson, and now I will never learn that lesson again. I will never let that be my reality again, because when your integrity is being challenged, or you're no longer able to work within that system and get that recognition and ultimately that reward that comes with it. Money is always a driver for us. And, at the time that I was experiencing that transition professionally, I was going through a significant transition personally. And I was going to be a single parent, and I was going to be an unemployed single parent. And I thought, okay, well, this is not ideal. So let's figure out how we can get back on the horse and live a different way. And it was really easy for me to prioritize what are the must-haves. What is that Maslow's hierarchy of needs? I knew at that moment that I had to take psychology for a reason as an undergraduate student to really understand, okay, basic needs are it.
Right.
That's it.
See, everybody, your degree does come back around.
It does come back around.
You do use it.
And math, because I was like, all right, now we got to figure out that budget, and we have to spreadsheet, and we have to know, and the critical thinking that we value in that journey. And so it was really easy for me to do. And, I took a pay cut that, I was making 1/3 what I had made when I started my new journey at now my institution, Florida Gulf Coast University. But I didn't care, because I felt valued in the work that I was doing. I knew that I was coming in to fulfill a really important role and need at that moment for the institution. I came in there and I was excited to just be behind the scenes doing the work that I needed to do. I didn't want to be visible again. I didn't want to be out in front of a group. I didn't want to be in a leadership role again. I wanted to be in a dark closet doing the work that was expected of me, because I didn't want that exposure that was going to bring that same kind of an outcome that I had experienced. And so I really had to I was okay with that. I didn't want to be in a position of leadership. I didn't want to be an AVP. I didn't want to be challenging the status quo. I legitimately just wanted to do a job that I was valued in doing. And it started out great.
But can't keep you in a box.
But I couldn't do it because, in that role, I was learning about all the ways that we did work across the entire institution. And I was recognizing right away, oh my gosh, we have so much that we could be doing better and differently and continuously improving. And so that's how I ended up right back into, the swing of things, of being a disruptor, of getting back out in the open. I don't need credit. I don't like when other people take credit for other people's work.
Yeah, me neither.
But I do not need the credit. I really do feel that there's more of a reward in seeing the change and seeing the implementation of a new program or building something so great that it gets moved somewhere else because it doesn't need you anymore. You need to move on to something that needs you. That's been my more recent experience. And for that, I feel greater reward and recognition than I ever have. That doesn't mean that you should not advocate for yourself and get paid what you're worth. It does not mean that you should sit idly by and say, it's all right, I don't need to get compensated for all that I'm doing. But it means when it's right and the time is right, you have that conversation, and you can point out that it would take 3 or 4 people to replace you.
Yes.
Should you move on?
Yes.
And don't be afraid to do that either.
Yeah. You've defined your own rewards. I like that. Where you're like, my reward, yes, and we will continuously advocate that you brought your hat with you. Everybody get paid what she's worth. Pay her what she's worth.
And there are days that I put it on. There are days that in the office I put it on. There are days that when I come home, I put it on, because I will tell you that I feel very valued by our leadership. And again, that's why I remain so committed and dedicated to the work that we do, despite the adversity, despite the challenge of being in a disruptor role that's not always appreciated because of the traditions. We work at a great institution that's 27 years young. And we thrive on calling ourselves so innovative. And my position is about that, right? It's about innovation and change and doing things that are on the cutting edge of higher education. I read articles all day, every day that pop up in my inbox because I want to know what good work is happening out there so that we can start looking at how we can embed that into the culture of our university. But the tradition and the traditionalists make it really hard to do that work.
Yeah.
And I still forge ahead and try to bring people along with me. And even though I'm being compensated so very fairly, that doesn't matter to me anymore, because if I'm not going home at the end of the day happy, it doesn't matter how much money I'm making today. I don't think I can keep doing it.
Yeah.
So recalibrating every single day has become necessary, and it's been hard recently. We're in a time of extreme change and extreme. There's a lot of external influence on our industry. We may find that a federally centralized way of looking at education in our country could be completely transformed, and there could be great things that come from that, and there could be a lot of devastation that comes from that, and it brings about a lot of anxiety. And I recognize that I'm feeling a lot of that anxiety every single day, and trying hard to keep it at bay and focus on our students.
Yeah, you're not alone. Well, the reward piece, it sounds like one of the ways that you have balanced the respect and the reward is to define it for yourself, of finding the actual rewards of what is very meaningful to you. We've talked about values a few times already in this conversation, but the impact that you're having, the students that you're seeing succeed, that is another form of reward for you besides just the money. But shameless plug for the hat, whatshe'sworth.com. I love it.
And I wear it all the time.
I love that.
And people really take note because they're like, wow, she's bold.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am.
You are bold. No, I want to double click on that for a second, because you are bold. And it's very interesting to hear you go back to this time where there was a really pivotal trust break moment for you at work, and how you responded of, well, I'm going to, I think the word you used was recalibrate. I'm going to recalibrate. And earlier you listed off these bullet point questions that were just foundational questions to a life and a career well lived. And so I'm curious though, how did you come out of that dark office where you were just, I want to keep my head down and do the work? How did you rebuild the trust, whether it was in the systems or in yourself, after some kind of disappointment or defeat? Because you are resilient. The things that I see roll off your back, the thick skin that you have, like, you don't let anybody shrink you. And that's something that is, I have no words. I have no words.
I think what's really hard, Ashleigh, is that I want to lift people up around me, and I don't want to get stuck in any of the type of behaviors that would compromise someone else's success. It's really hard when you're around people who do tend to do that, and that assume that that's your style. Mm-hmm. And so I want people to be able to work with me so that they know who I am, and that is how I rose above that dark place. Getting people to trust in me, and know that I'm going to do whatever it takes to do the right thing and put 180% into what I do. Because if I'm not, then I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I thought for some time about just being done with having a career and, going into more of these like voluntary roles and hoping that it all panned out for me, and starting nonprofits and doing things that I knew would have that intrinsic reward for another audience. But I love this profession. I love what we do. I still believe so much in the value of education and the opportunity that it gives to people when they embrace it and they do it. And the fact that I've been able to now shift focus on less traditional forms of that and focus on micro credentials and short-term training and ways that we can provide even more access than we ever have before for somebody to really move forward from what they're experiencing and not feel like I did as a college senior saying, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I want to do. It was so natural to just be able to stay in college, but that's not the reality for so many people. And they shouldn't have to have that be their reality. They should be able to find the moment that works for them now and how to translate that into what comes next. And so leadership is what did it. You know, I worked for a leader that gave me a chance to come to FGCU knowing what I had just experienced. But because he had come to know me in my role at the previous institution, when I reached out to him to just let him know that I would no longer be a liaison for some of the projects we had been working on, and to say that, you know, I would be open, you know, to work if he ever saw value in me contributing in any way, led to me getting at first a very part-time opportunity that transitioned 4 years later into a full-time role to develop something to support adults that had started college at one day and wanted to come back and finish because for whatever reason it wasn't their pathway at that moment. But you know, we have upwards of 43 million individuals in the country now that have that as their experience. And this was my way of being able to connect with that, get out in front of that trend, because those are individuals now coming back and saying education is a virtue. It is something that's going to help, you know, it's that investment in human capital, something that our tremendous leader says a lot, that education is our investment in human capital. And how can we continue to do that? So having that opportunity to present what you know and how you know it and your value to leaders at every level of the organization made the biggest difference for me. And I had a leader that championed for me and opened up that door for me to do something new, something innovative. And when our now president came on board, she and I connected right away. She was in a different role at the time, but you know, through this transitional time of having a global pandemic and having, you know, natural disasters that really impacted our area, leadership changed. And I had the tremendous opportunity to work directly with her. And she continued to champion for the work that I was doing and give me more opportunity to oversee innovative programming and continue to be that disruptor, while certainly being one of those leaders that reminded me, you need to be patient. You need to try to get people to, you know, to come along with you and not just row as fast as you can. But you know, it's leadership. It's having leaders that you believe in and that you want to support in their role, because they're showing the same integrity that I find to be so critically important.
Yeah. So you have had some professional support from sounds like some excellent leaders, but I also know that support systems are incredibly important to you and that they can make or break your growth, right? You just talked about how having professional support made it for you, right? But who else is in your corner? I want to know, because all the challenges that, you know, you've gone through and, you know, the tough days that you still sometimes have, you know, who's there for you and how have those relationships shaped your leadership?
Well, you know, I must mention my amazing partner in life, Scott. You know, if it weren't for him, I would not be the person I am today at all. And he is someone who 100% supported my journey personally and professionally. If I flash back to about, I don't even know, it's probably 15 years ago now, 15 years ago now, you know, I was in a role in my professional life where I was told, we need to get everybody to do this. It doesn't matter who they are, what they are. They need to take the lead. They need to respond to these prompts. And it had to do with us keeping ourselves accredited. And a dean at the time had been given the charge of one of these areas. And we're in a meeting and the dean said, well, obviously we've been doing XYZ because we're a college that's been here for this long. And I looked at him and I said, you're the dean, you're the leader of 150 people at this institution. And if you're not taking this seriously, how is anybody else going to be taking this seriously? And I said, you know what? I think we need to end the meeting. So I end the meeting. And here I reported to that person.
I love this.
I reported to this person. So when I walked out, my now partner in life had followed me out of the room and said, I like you.
Oh,
and here
we love Scott.
I know we liked Scott at that time, but we love Scott.
Yeah.
And, I think when you surround yourself with people that champion for you, we were never going to be married. He very firmly believed and still does, and me having independence. He believes very much in me paving the way for my own self, but I want him to let me be codependent sometimes because it doesn't hurt. And it's him that, I owe a lot of that to. And then my amazing son, Nolan, I mean, he has allowed me to be a balanced parent, he calls me almost every day. So I hope he doesn't hear this because he might stop calling me every day. But he's, now that he's in college and he could see me every day. He does not. He's out of his way not to. But he calls me every day when he's walking back from class just to tell me how it went.
Aww.
And I hope that doesn't change.
Yeah.
I really, really hope that he thinks of me as someone that he wants to. And then my parents, my family, my sister works in higher education now. What's really kind of fun to talk about is that my dad had a very professional career in the corporate world. He rose to be a vice president of a Fortune 500 company. My mom was an educator before helping to just raise our family. And so being in educational administration is kind of fun for me because it's like the best qualities of my parents, both in terms of their nurturing and their own professional endeavors. I'm really a mix of that. And so I love that they invested in me and my siblings to be able to go and get our education and then decide what we wanted to do with it and to be supportive of whatever that became. So that, and then the many friends that I have, of course, you being one of them. I've never had the opportunity to work closely with you, but my gosh, to admire you from far and know that I've had an impact on you personally and professionally gives me great joy. It's more impactful than if we got to work together every day for you to hold me in that high regard. And I can't thank you enough for that honor. And then I have to talk about Wrigley and her sister Molly, who didn't make it today because she's not as nice to Lainey.
Yes, and they are trying to play down there right now.
I didn't have this one. She's now my new balance. Like when I come home from a hard day, she knows and she just sits here with me.
She does.
And she reminds me that, Mommy, it's all good.
Yeah.
Everything's good.
Yeah, that's how I feel about Lainey too. She's just a little more disruptive to stay with the theme of today. Lainey's a little more disruptive, but she's down here. But I think that's so wonderful that you have such a great support system. And I think that's for a reason. I think it's for a reason. I think you are just someone who champions the people in your life, and it makes everybody want to champion you back. So I just love that you are just surrounded.
Well, I have to talk about my bracelets for a second.
Oh, yeah.
So these are bracelets that many years ago, before I think they were super, super well known and popular, I discovered Little Words Project. And these bracelets are meant to give us constant reminders of things that we need to do to lift ourselves up. And so when I found these, I thought, oh my gosh, I want to get them for everyone I know. And it was probably 2 months before Hurricane Ian had hit our coast and caused extreme devastation for so many, but in particular my immediate family and my husband's family. And so I had just bought like 4 of them that said Elevate. And little did we know that we really should have elevated much, much higher than we did to preserve our lives and our things and our homes. But it gave me the most joy to be able to hand that to these strong women who had endured the storm and in some cases thought they might lose their lives that day, that night. And so then I thought, well, now I'm addicted. I have to buy them for anyone and everyone I know. And so they actually are I wear them. When I wake up every morning, I think, what do I need today? Do I need good energy? Do I need to remind the world and myself that I can be a badass and I am a badass? Do I need to choose joy? Patience, balance, and and I choose the ones I need and I put them on. And some of the most wonderful people in this world have gifted me now with these bracelets. And I think we should have what she's worth ones.
I think we should.
We should.
We should definitely. Well, you for sure got me. You're the first one to give me one of these, right? We know Taylor Swift took it to the next level with the friendship bracelets, but a long time ago, you gave me one while I was going through something that really was testing me. That was my pivotal trust break when in my career. You gave me one that said, "You've got this," and I still wear that one every single day. I don't have it on today though because it got some stuff on it from the FedEx man the other day. There was this black stuff all over the box, but I still do wear it every day. And I'm wearing another one today that you gave me that says Rise Above. My boss actually gave me one that says Know Your Worth.
That's incredible.
And then I have the one that we both share that says Badass.
Yes.
So, and this is my podcast. I can say that if I want to. So now I have a whole stack of them and I do the same thing that you do of like, what am I going to need today? It is so amazing how much it helps. You know, if I know I'm going into a tough meeting or a conversation or something that I'm dreading, I'm like, I can put these on and they feel a little bit like armor, like a little bit like that extra little push I need to make it
They're
through.
like a delicate, cute bling armor. And Good Energy is one you gave me, Ashleigh, and I wear that one the most now.
Yeah.
I do. And Choose Joy is one. It's when you meet somebody that needs it more, you give them away.
Yeah.
And I've given so many of them away that I sometimes need back. And so, so I'm never giving some of these away again.
I loaded you up for your birthday and the holidays. So I was like, I'm going on Little Words Project and buying you as many as I can. But yeah, Little Words Project, if you're listening, we need one that says What She's Worth.
What She's Worth.
I would love that. And put it on whatshesworth.com, little merch store that we have. So yeah. Well, I mean, I could talk to you forever, but I do have just a few more questions for you.
Yeah.
We've talked about innovation. We've talked about pushback. We've talked about resilience and integrity and all kinds of things. So I think that there are a lot of women out there who want to innovate within their roles, where they are very much like you, and it's hard to sit on your hands and stop yourself from doing the things that you want to move forward, that you want to push forward within the roles that they currently have, but they might feel stifled by that traditional workplace culture. And so what advice do you have?
Come work with me.
Yes, come work with Kristen.
Oh gosh, it's so hard because in all the times that I have had that feeling, I don't really know what the magic combination of experiences and opportunities has actually allowed me to come through it. I really don't. You have to remain true to your belief system. You have to say the things in a respectful way as many times as you can to as many people as will listen. And try, as I have to remind myself every day, to do it with grace, to insert your passion appropriately. Try not to be overly assertive so that it comes across as aggressive, because it's very easy for it to be misinterpreted as more aggressive.
Especially as a woman.
Yeah. Recently I was listening in on an important interview that was happening, and I couldn't see the person. I could only hear their responses. And I realized on that very day, I never, ever, ever want to just have a phone conversation with someone anymore. I don't. I'm so glad that we're in a day and age that we can at least have the Teams or the Zoom meeting or the FaceTime, because I need to see someone's expressions to make sure they're interpreting me right. And what I've even realized in meetings recently, if you're making eye contact with one person, they're reading you, they're reading the room. But if they're not looking at you, and so many people are looking at their devices, or they're taking notes, or they're not dialed into your visual cues, they can misinterpret in tone so easily. And so I'm trying really hard to remind myself of that. And because I can't soften my tone as much as I want to, I just have been very unable to do that. I also don't have a poker face. So if you're looking at me, you're going to know exactly what I think.
Yeah.
And so when we were all forced to work online, I actually loved it because I could see a lot of reactions at once, and I could make eye contact with everybody when they didn't even realize I was making eye contact with them. And I found myself to be a much better communicator in that modality than I am in others. So bringing it back to that interview, I really had to ask colleagues who were there in person, is this person, is she aggressive or is she confident?
Yeah.
Is she is it something where she's just really strong and someone we would be excited to work with, or is she someone who's just like overly confident and arrogant? Because it's hard, and I think sometimes I've been misinterpreted, and I don't know if it's the Midwest twang to my voice in Southwest Florida, where we have a melting pot, of course, and many different accents and origins. I do find myself, when there are cool accents in the room, that I'm so much more trusting of the things they say. And maybe that's part of it. I don't know, but you have to just keep saying it to anyone who will listen, but also be someone who's willing to research the why behind you feel so passionately about something. Make sure it's not just your perspective, your opinion. You don't have to get people along and believing with you, but if you see that there's positive impact, especially when it's something in a field where there is research to back it up, even if it's emerging, getting your words out there by having that research to back it up is really important.
Yeah, I think you brought up something so important here too, that, I do a lot of research and work on, especially with What She's Worth. It's one of the areas that I want to focus on, and that is the double standards. So women who want to make change, there's often this extra added layer of obstacle that comes with it, where we hear about so many double standards of, if someone of a specific gender is coming across at, with big ideas and bold insights and feels comfortable to say it in a room, he might be labeled a leader. He might be labeled assertive. He might be labeled a go-getter. And unfortunately, women have this added layer of, she might be labeled aggressive. She might be labeled bossy. She might be labeled, all kinds of different things, just because there is this knee-jerk reaction when women go against being soft and polite and agreeable. And it's so I
think we've all been raised by strong moms.
Yes.
And I hope that every generation continues to do that, so that we don't see the disparities in gender or expectations that go from generation to generation.
Yeah.
When I first was studying service learning and thinking of that as the career I wanted, because there are so many social issues that generations before us have been able to just kind of shift to the side, and that it was going to be up to my generation to actually combat those things head on and start making a difference. I think that continues to be cyclical, and it continues to be generational. And I hope that we will reach a point in our certainly professional lives where we don't have to have that conversation anymore, but it is absolutely the reality, and it absolutely exists. And I have seen a lot of female leaders in the past who have wrapped up their innovations and their ideas and their suggestions in a perfect tiny little package and handed it to a male leader in the organization, who has then been able to open the box and get it done. And I think they find the value. They've been able to find their value in that, because it's manipulation in a good way, I would say. But having to hone in on some of those skills has been what others have had to rely on to get past that situation. I don't have it in me to manipulate. I want to be genuine.
Yeah.
And it's really hard when you get labeled as someone who's manipulative. And again, it's because I think we all women see themselves backed up into a corner, even with other women, saying, okay, can I trust this person? Or are they trying to manipulate me? Or are they being too assertive? Or what's their long game? My long game, I'm not in a job thinking, where am I going to go next? That's where that long distance runner comment came from. It was, I'm not in this job thinking, okay, now that I'm here, what do I get next? I'm in this job, and if I get naturally identified as someone who could take us to the next, then I'll be interested in pursuing it. But I'm not here thinking about what's my next job. I just want to do what I can do to the best of my ability. we've got to lift each other up in that same way, and try not to be competitive with one another, because we're already having to compete against other obstacles, potentially that gender gap.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to end on this question. So you're talking about lifting others up, and I feel like you have so much to give. It is very clear that you have shattered some ceilings, right? Dean without a doctorate. Now you're in an assistant vice president role. I mean, you are someone that other women can look up to. So my last question for you before we wrap up is, what would you say to a woman who's just getting started on her leadership journey?
Not everyone might have had a Mrs. McGovern that identified them as a leader at age 5. But if you are a leader, it can't be stifled.
Right.
And if you're not finding the opportunity to lead in a way that brings you joy and value, you need to be willing to go somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And that is probably the hardest thing for anyone to ever do. But one of the best pieces of advice that my father has ever given me is that you should never be looking for a job if you don't already have one. So don't let go, look for the job while you have one.
Yes.
So that because you always have the opportunity to write your own future by looking for that next opportunity. So we cannot sit idly by and think, I'm trapped here. Mm-hmm. I have no other opportunity. No way. Get to know that network, get involved outside of your professional role.
Right.
And I think you have been a mentor for me in that way, Ashleigh, because you have done so much to engage yourself in the community beyond what your professional role is, because you believe in networking and the importance of it, and the genuine networking, going back to that relationship building. It's not about, oh, I better get to know this person so that when I need them, I can call upon them. People are going to see that if that's your agenda.
Yeah, totally.
So if that's your agenda, you're not a leader. And you should probably step aside and just see yourself as someone who can be an amazing doer.
Yeah.
But probably shouldn't be trying to move into a leadership role if you're all about, what can that person do for me? That quid pro quo. It's got to be genuine. And then those doors open.
Right.
Those doors open for you, whether it's internally at the place you are, or whether it's a new place that's going to emerge and even give you better opportunity and joy than you ever imagined you would have had if you had not taken that step to try it.
Yeah. And I think that brings it full circle. You talked earlier about purpose, especially when you had that, you were let go from your position. And I think that is such an important piece. When you say I'm out in the community and I'm doing all these things, it's because years ago, I did the work to figure out what I would consider my purpose. And it changes, it evolves for some people. For me, it did not. I had somebody ask me why I do what I do over and over and over again. Shout out Dr. Billy Gunnels. That was a really frustrating conversation when I was 27.
Sounds like I need to talk to him soon.
Well, don't worry. I have internalized his methods, so I can do it to you if you want. But I ended up writing my purpose statement after a conversation that I had with him years ago. And I quickly realized, and now I also teach other people, that your purpose is not a job title. If you are writing a purpose statement, your personal mission statement, which I teach students how to do, if you are writing it and there is a job title in it, we're not done yet. We need to take the job title out and talk about the impact you want to have, because the impact I want to have is where I find the common theme in all of the things that I do. And if I were, heaven forbid, to lose my job tomorrow, I have been so involved in my purpose that I have other things that I could pour into that would give me the same sense of fulfillment. This podcast being one of them.
And you're helping others do that. You're helping those of us that you are honoring with what we're worth. I mean, for me to be honored on your podcast is tremendous. And you're doing that for others as well. So you're not only taking your purpose for you and what you hope to do, and that's your purpose, right? Is really to bring attention and positive light to what you find purpose in. And you've done that so successfully. And I'm so glad to be just an observer of your journey, because you are a tremendous leader.
Well,
you are the one that should be interviewed on your podcast.
I assure you that the honor is all mine to have you here today. So I feel like we could talk for hours and keep going, but thank you. I mean, thank you so much. When I said I have been waiting for this conversation, I really have. And I know that there are so many more things that we can talk about because you are part of my support system. And I just hope that I could do the same for you, but yours is definitely a voice that I want to amplify to give a little shout out to our tagline of amplifying the voices of women in the workplace. But you're one of the people that really inspired this. You're one of the people whose voices I want everyone to hear, and I want them to hear how amazing and genuine and you're a leader that I trust and someone that I want to follow. So the honor is truly mine.
Oh, we love each other.
We do love each other. Thank you.
And Wrigley are laying together in peace. Oh, no,
they are. Yeah, that's okay. We're going to play with you in just a second. I promise, both of you. But thank you so much, Kristen, for being here. I am for sure going to want to have you back. I know we have so many more stories to share, but I so appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
That's a wrap on today's episode. If you enjoyed this conversation, make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. If you found value in today's discussion, I'd love it if you left a review. It really helps more people discover the show. Want to keep the conversation going? Connect with us on Instagram at What She's Worth for more insights, updates, and inspiration. You can also watch video episodes on YouTube. Just search for the What She's Worth channel. And if you're looking for empowering merch to rep your ambition, head over to whatshe'sworth.com to shop our latest designs. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.